I'm Kurt Wagner.
And I'm Mike Epley.
We're old college debate teammates who disagree about pretty much everything as often as possible.
In each episode, we examine a question inspired by the week's events.
Despite our disagreements, we're friends. We respect each other, we keep each other honest, and we have fun doing it.
And most importantly, we drink.
Offering a fresh, informed snapshot of the debates that dominate contemporary discourse, this is Right Brain, Left Brain.
Hey, Kurt.
Hey, Mike.
Which is your favorite Kill Bill movie? Volume 1 or Volume 2?
I'm going to run a critique
on
that question.
You're not a Kill Bill fan, huh?
No, I like Kill Bill, but I'm saying that Kill Bill was written, produced, directed, and edited as one film. And so the distinction to put it into two movies was done purely as like a post-production money-making scheme. And so it's not
Capitalism.
Two movies. It's one long film that capitalizes on the fact that Tarantino had intentionally made a very long feature because, like, you know, in the movies that he was like giving an homage to, they're as long as both of those put together. And so he wouldn't have done it where there was just one. You know, and when they would release a lot of those movies in the United States, they would cut them into the lengths of time that American audiences were more familiar with, like the feature length. But honestly, like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of movies that are good movies, even if they're long, like there's a huge difference between how good each of the Lord of the Rings movies is if you watch each of them individually and then wait a week and then see the next one and then wait a week and then see the next one versus how good they are
if you watch them back to back.
If you sit down and watch all three back to back. Because, spoiler alert, if you haven't done that before, they're fucking not good by the end. I fucking promise.
That's 9 hours. That's crazy. Hey, welcome to Right Brain, Left Brain, the champagne of podcasts.
Real podcast for my sham friends and real pain for my podcast friends.
Whoa. Fucking Right Brain Kurt's on it tonight.
Already had too many shots.
Some shots, yeah.
This podcast today is brought to you by Seagram's Gin.
Seagram's Gin. Okay. I'm with it. I'm with it.
That's right.
That's about as low as you can go on the shelf before the bottle turns plastic.
No, you trust me, you can go lower, especially if you're in the military. At the military, like however bad and however low the bar is at the worst civilian liquor store, like the military base exchanges or post exchanges, PX or BX, depending on what branch of the service you're talking about. There is a special brand called Military Special.
But it comes in a glass bottle?
No, it comes in plastic.
I told you. That's what I said about Seagram's. Seagram's is as low as you can go before it becomes plastic.
But that's what I'm saying. There's several grades of
plastic. That's true. There's a lot of grades of plastic.
I think that there's probably some glass bottles you can buy there. I don't know. This is a race
that are lower than Seagram's?
This is a race to the bottom, and the only person who can really sort it out is like the homeless guy that we walked by on our way back from Safeway.
Actually, brother, I'll take over from here. You got right in my wheelhouse.
Just happen to have the windows open while you were recording. And also brought to you by Hot Pockets.
Hot Pockets.
You have to stretch your food stamps. What are you going to get? Hot Pockets, of
from
course.
Safeway.
Yeah,
4 for $10 or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah, when you become lower middle class, you get to buy the cheap shit. As long as it's got a yellow tag, you don't even look at it. You just buy the shit.
You're like, I know
I can afford this because it's on sale at Safeway.
Whereas I remember definitely being so poor that I had to be like, okay, well now I've identified the things that are within my price range, but I still have to do a lot of scrutinizing. Yeah. I found this yellow tag.
Yeah. This one's 2 for $5. This one's 5 for $10. Now I have to do math. Damn it. Hey, thank you to our loyal listeners who keep this show alive. If it wasn't for you, we'd stop making the show.
Yeah. So thanks for, telling your friends about the show and sharing our work on social media. Without you, again, we would quit. Well, let's be real here. We'd kill ourselves, but we would make it really unpleasant too. So really, I mean, if blackmail is what it takes to make you give to us on Patreon, then consider this it.
Yeah, if we don't get 1,500 listens this month, I'm going to kill myself on chat roulette. Is chat roulette still a thing?
I don't know if chat roulette's a thing, but chatterbait's definitely a thing.
Okay, I'll kill myself on chatterbait. Just kidding. I won't do that. Also, trigger warning. Sorry, we talk about suicide in this episode. It's a little late. A little late for the trigger warning.
Should have warned you before the trigger.
Who does that? Right brain, left brain, apparently.
Trigger warning. We joked about something earlier in this episode, so don't go back and listen to it again.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, listeners talking about and sharing our show, whether it be in person or on social media, is really the main way that our show has grown, and it's the way that it continues to grow. So if you like our show, please tell your friends about us. Tell the friends about us that you told once before who were like, yeah, I tried to listen, but I couldn't get past Mike's voice, or I couldn't get past Kurt's arguments. Tell them to try again.
Some people don't like good arguments.
Yes. Also, thank you so much to our Patreon subscribers. This week is the week in February where we are publishing our first Patreon-only episode all about the Donald's National Emergency Declaration and the Wall. And it's a fucking lit episode. It's awesome. Go check it out.
That's patreon.com/RBLB pod. If you were spelling that out phonetically, you would say Romeo Bravo, Lima Bravo. Pod.
Romeo Bravo, Lima Bravo. I kind of like it. Subscribe. The episode's awesome. You'll love it. We swear.
Or none of your money back. So what's going on in the world?
All right. Well, there's a few things that have been going on this week. We can call them sort of honorable mentions. First, and most exciting for Left Brain Mike here, is Bernie Sanders, the little-known upstart from Vermont, is running for president again.
At the ripe young age of 273.
273 years young. Have you seen him run? I've seen him run. After 2 long years of generally agreeing with my political allies on the left, finally, a reason to hate each other again. $15 minimum wage or $13 minimum wage. I fucking hate you, you fucking fascist. I'll see you at Thanksgiving.
You fucking communists are going to ruin leftism for everybody. I think it's also interesting to note that the Mueller report will be released to the Department of Justice as early as next week.
Oh, fuck. We really got to get cracking on those Russia Saga episodes.
Yeah, well, as I'm frequently prone to point out, because this was a whole lot of something about nothing, a disappointing and anticlimactic end.
We'll see.
And speaking of a disappointing end, after Gavin Newsom canned the California high-speed railway,
rest in peace,
Donald Trump tweeted out a request for a refund of the federal money that was put into the project.
And Gavin is not really responding to these requests for a refund. He appears to be ghosting the president.
Yeah, he's run out on that check. But that's because he already spent the money on a partial section of the high-speed rail that links 2 communities where everybody has cars and there is no traffic. And nobody will use the fucking rail system.
Hey, that's not the hill Left Brain Mike's going to die on this week. What hill is Left Brain Mike going to die on this week?
That's right. We're not talking about any of that other horrible stuff today. Today, instead, we are discussing a completely different garbage issue.
Yeah, we're talking about Jussie Smollett and the alleged hate crime that may or may not be a hoax.
So for anybody who hasn't been paying attention or hasn't been paying attention to the full story, Jussie Smollett is an actor who plays Jamal on the show Empire. One of the most important timeline events that happened was less than 2 weeks before the famous Chicago incident that's dominated media headlines. Smollett received a threatening letter in the mail.
So yeah, the letter itself, not only did it have that sort of 80s movie ransom note quality to it, but it also contained an unknown white powder, which turned out to be crushed aspirin, I believe. And it did make racial and homophobic insults and also, of course, a death threat. And, of course, sending threatening letters by mail is a federal offense, and so the FBI has been investigating. Smollett himself contacted the media about the letter, but the letter itself got actually pretty little attention.
Yeah, and in fact, it's worth noting that when the Chicago incident broke, a few weeks later, and then in the corresponding coverage, the threat letter to Smollett was mentioned very infrequently in a lot of that coverage. 2 weeks after the threat letter, give or take, Smollett reported to a Chicago area hospital claiming he'd been attacked by 2 white men in downtown Chicago outside a hotel.
Yeah, he claimed that the attackers beat him, called him the F word and the N word, which I won't say, recognizing him from Empire, and claimed, according to Smollett, quote, "This is MAGA country," as they attacked him.
Yeah, I'm not going to get Papa John'd off my own podcast. I'm not saying that word. Smollett then drove himself to the hospital and told doctors and police that during the beating, the attackers tied a noose around his neck. The noose was still around his neck when he arrived at the hospital, and then he showed up at the hospital with an unknown chemical thought to be bleach poured all over him.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about the national political context for this story. There have been numerous high-profile incidents involving race and or politics reported in the media. We have seen cell phone videos galore, whether it be racist tirades or outbursts in Starbucks. Have you seen the sort of recent one of the guy just screaming Democrats?
No.
It's very funny.
But it sounds it's
a crazy guy, and he's just going, Democrats!
That's the thing about this viral video thing is that, like, for San Francisco, that's very normal.
Yeah. We all have videos of fights. Of course, we have the famous one from a few weeks ago of kids in MAGA hats squaring off against Native Americans with drums. It's all extremely confusing and upsetting. But the popular impression of these incidents, at least on the left, are that conservatives are emboldened by the Trump presidency and frequently instigate conflict and carry out these kind of attacks. And those that are not carrying out the attacks or instigating conflict are at best just dismissive of the attacks on racial minorities and or LGBTQ groups, or just silent on the matter.
And on the right, a lot of people feel that these incidents are either rare isolated incidents in a big country of over 300 million people that are unfairly connected to an overall political narrative, or they have no political connection at all in most cases, is the argument on the right. But
yeah. So we'll talk quickly about the portrayal of the attack in the media after it was reported. So the story first broke, of course, from TMZ, who is like
only the highest quality real news.
Yeah, they're there, man. They're there for the scoop. Eventually, it did become a top media story. In fact, it didn't take long.
Details of the incident were released, changed, challenged, changed again, reported on. Then other news sources reported on those reports with variations until nobody knew exactly what happened.
Yeah, lots of variables, whether the attackers wore MAGA hats, whether Smollett fought back, whether Smollett cooperated with police after the attack, why Smollett didn't turn over his cell phone to investigators, what the attackers said during the attack, whether Smollett knew the attackers. Despite the cloudy details and open questions, news sources generally accepted Smollett's account and ran the story.
I mean, pretty clear here that if it bleeds, it leads.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Many politicians, journalists, and actors seized on the story, tweeting their condolences and support towards Smollett. And some Trump supporters and conservatives immediately expressed skepticism at the story as soon as they heard the details of it. They asked if it did happen, does it really implicate everybody who voted for or supports Trump? And, how is it fair that this is being used to implicate every Republican, conservative, and Trump supporter out there?
Yeah, well, there's been new developments, and now police sources have come out saying that they believe Smollett may have fabricated the whole thing. The two black men that they apprehended allegedly told police that Smollett hired them to fake the attack.
Smollett has denied this, but he's also lawyered up with one of the lawyers who actually represented Michael Cohen and is pretty silent on the matter these days.
As of recording, Smollett is officially a suspect, at least according to the Chicago PD.
And time will tell if this specific allegation is true, but regardless of the final outcome, it's safe to say the worm can has been opened, and a beast like myself can't help but eat an open can of worms.
Well, we know how you feel about it. How do your brethren on the right feel about this story?
Well, the right-wing viewpoint on this is that the story sounded fake from the beginning, and that politically weaponized hate crimes and hate crime hoaxes are more real than hate crimes, especially hate crimes that have a political connection. And I totally agree with that. And I think that this is yet another piece of fake news engineered to slander Republicans for the gain of Democrats. And again, shocker, fake news media is the chief agent of that agenda.
Well, I fucking never.
I do, and you do all the time.
Well, people on the left tend to believe people when they claim to be victims of violence. It is part of our brand as being on the left. Many of my friends on the left are confused and embarrassed right now because we don't really know what's going on. There have been a lot of deleted tweets in the last few days from allies and supporters of Smollett on the left. I've myself tweeted support of him, but I haven't deleted them, and I won't. But I might tweet again defending
You'll
myself.
pry this tweet from my cold, dead hands.
Yeah. And a lot of people on the left have really just gone quiet on the matter. Most public figures are in the let's wait and see what the facts turn up stage whenever they're questioned about it. And I sort of am also in the we'll see camp of people. But I do think conservative commentators who have been latching onto this are absolutely off the mark with their gotcha claims of haha, see, Republicans aren't ever racist. So maybe we could talk about that. That brings us to the question.
All right. So what does the Jussie Smollett scandal say about American politics? On the right, I say that fake hate crimes are real. They create real innocent victims that are unrelated to any of these stories, and that people should have recognized this story as one of those fake hate crimes for political weaponization from the start.
And I say that it shows how shallow news media is, and it shows that we care more about playing political football than we care about solving these problems. And whether Smollett's story is real or not real, that doesn't take away from the greater points about race and the way race interacts with politics in America. And not just race, but also homosexuality and violence.
There's nothing like race, violence, and homosexuality coming together to make me want to drink. So
yeah, let's down one.
Let's down one.
Oh, that was nice. Cheers.
Cheers. If only we had toasted to the Crafty Beaver like we should have.
I don't know what that means, but I agree.
Crafty Beaver was one of the hardware stores.
Oh, the Crafty Beaver.
That the Nigerian brothers were.
That's where the rope was bought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's up, man? What do you got to say?
Okay. Well, like I said before, fake hate crimes are real. They create real innocent victims, and people should have recognized that this story was fake. Let's start with the issue at hand. Media and activists should have been way more critical of the Smollett story. There had been the threat letter weeks before. There were so many reports where sloppy reporters either didn't know about the letter or intentionally omitted it because it was very, very, very widely not mentioned in a lot of these accounts of the Chicago attack. This is also what triggered the federal investigation that put the investigatory cloud over Smollett entirely. And once the federal investigators had suspected that he had sent that letter to himself, it gave them a reason to reach out to Chicago police and let them know about that. And once they knew about that, obviously that's why so quickly he was considered a suspect. But there's a lot of factual inconsistencies that weren't addressed by the media until after things had come out from law enforcement. Like there was a polar vortex over the Midwest, right? And Wisconsin is supposedly such a famously alcoholic state that, during the worst of blizzards that they keep the bars open, and they only close the bars in Wisconsin when the blizzards are really, really bad. And the bars were closed in Wisconsin, but not just that, people actually died because of the polar vortex. And supposedly out in the middle of this polar vortex, white nationalist Trump supporters are in a prominently black city on the prowl with bleach and a noose in red MAGA hats. I don't know, are these people Nirvana fans?
Let me say that even if the bars in Wisconsin were closed, we know that at least the subway in Chicago was still open.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Nothing like finding out that my favorite watering hole is closed to make me say that I want to go out and commit a hate crime. So I don't want to skip ahead to common ground, though. Look, Chicago is not a place that it's safe to wear a MAGA hat. It's definitely not safe to start attacking the ethnic group who make up the majorities in many neighborhoods. If this had been real, somebody would have intervened, because I grew up in the Chicago region just outside the city. I don't think it would be safe to commit a hate crime as white people against a black person. It's not even safe to wear a MAGA hat, but don't even get me off trail on that. I'll get to more of that in a second. Nobody in politics, the public, or media used common sense because they wanted it to be real so they could use it as a political weapon. And it's opposed to conservatives who are frequently criticized as being naive or portrayed as racist because we want this not to be real, right? But dude, fake hate crimes are real, and the media is frequently trying to tell us that we have to believe every fake hate crime victim. Here's just a few of the fake hate crimes since 2015 associated with MAGA. There have been a number of high-profile incidents where MAGA supporters supposedly vandalized churches, and they were actually done by parishioners to falsely implicate the MAGA Trump crowd, including one high-profile incident where vandalism at a Brooklyn synagogue was ultimately found to be committed by a New York City anti-hate crimes worker. Go figure. There have been multiple incidents of swastikas and other racist symbols at universities and other big institutions with pro-Trump rhetoric included that also trace back to, shocker, surprise, right, liberal activists and not actual Trump supporters. Multiple bomb threats made against Jewish institutions where the threatener implicated right-wingers, only to lead back to liberals. Sometimes literally left-wing reporters making their own news about fake hate crimes. Claims of Trump supporters attacking women with hijabs, only for the victim later to admit that it was cover for something else. else or some other way to weaponize this MAGA hate crime perception. These are the problems that hate crimes create. Like, they incite people to use explosives and guns to commit terrorism and murder, like in furtherance of this hysteria, like when Steve Scalise and others were shot at a softball game, including the incidents where a grown man punched a kid in a MAGA hat at a fast food restaurant, like when a group of liberal protesters beat a senior citizen in a MAGA hat into a bloody mess down here in Burgerling. Like, other aspects of like left-wing terrorism, bullying, and thuggery born out of totally untrue hysteria about MAGA that have led to a worse actual rate and number of incidents in a witch hunt against this. Like, the media and these left-wing activists and these politicians don't care about black people. They care about making a weapon out of fake hate crimes, or taking incidents that are not racial and making them a racial weapon. But other than that, I think you guys are good people. Do you want to drink before you go on to your main argument, sir?
Yeah, I do. Of course I do.
Well, I want to eat another cupcake.
And I want to eat my friend Parsnip Pete here, the chocolate bunny, because it's Easter season, and I fucking love chocolate bunnies.
Cheers.
All right, Suck, are you ready for this?
I am ready, because it's your turn.
All right, so I'm going to start off my argument with a very large little throat-clearing section. I get it. The Smollett case might be a hoax. But obviously, when a person reports a heinous hate crime, you give that person your sympathy and you believe that person until you know that they are lying. At least I try to do that. And I think a lot of liberals, and I think a lot of moderates, and I think a lot of conservatives also generally take that as a principle as well. Now, in the status quo, it does look like Smollett himself is under investigation by both the FBI and the Chicago police. I get it. That's not a good look. You know, it's looking more and more like it is a hoax, and I'm just one of the people that got duped. But here's the thing. Even if Jussie Smollett's story is a hoax, conservatives are still coming to the wrong conclusion about what that says about American politics. Kurt argues that many stories that come out linking the MAGA crowd to violence and racism turn out to be hoaxes. And sure, that's definitely true. Kurt has brought up some examples that were definitely hoaxes, but there are at least some stories that come out, very similar stories and videos and whatnot, that are not hoaxes. And also there's more that are just far more complex than the way that they're painted to be, whether it be painted for the liberal side or the conservative side. But then Kurt makes this massive logical leap from like, look, some of these stories are hoaxes, to see MAGA isn't racist or violent at all. No. At best, the appropriate conclusion from the Smollett story is not every story of racism or violence is true. Like, I'm on board with that thesis. But then Kurt tries to use the example to prove some kind of rule, which is exactly what his criticism is of the left, which is part of the huge hypocrisy of this being a political football in the first place. One hoax does not mean that all of the stories are hoaxes. One attack based on, one MAGA person attacking a minority doesn't mean that every MAGA person attacks minorities. Charlottesville was not a hoax. People Sieg hailing and giving the Nazi salute to Trump at his rallies and not getting kicked out of the rallies is documented and not a hoax. Screaming the N-word, screaming the F-word, beating people, those things are not hoaxes. Trump telling his supporters from the podium to beat protesters is not a hoax. The FBI report that hate crimes increased by 17% last year. Also, that's not a hoax. I'm not citing these statistics to prove that all Trump supporters are racists or homophobes or bigots, but some of them are. And it's a big pervasive problem in the MAGA camp. Kurt himself has even argued that the biggest problem in the Republican Party is, as he puts it in our first episode, all the fucking racists. Ultimately, individual examples do not prove or disprove rules on either side of this question. There is no rule on either side. As much as we might want there to be one, having only red and blue crayons on this topic, it may be simple, but it's not accurate to say like, okay, the Smollett story, it was fabricated, and so therefore that's a point for red, which means it's a point toward the conclusion that the MAGA crowd is never racist. That's not how this works. It's not the way to frame the issue, and it's the absolute wrong conclusion to come to, regardless of whether the story is true or not. And with that, I rest my case.
All right. Let me ask you this, Mike. What's the opposite of a hate crime?
A love crime.
Right. That's like the joking rhetorical answer to that question, right? But the truth is that like literally when we talk about love crimes, like love crimes in the law are defined as like things when like someone is extorting your wife and is going to ruin her reputation, so you murder that person, right? Crimes of passion or love crimes.
If I had a nickel.
And honestly, the truth is at the end of the day, all crimes are hate crimes, especially crimes that involve violence. even if it's against a stranger for non-racial reasons. And I'm not saying that I am opposed to hate crimes legislation. That's not my argument. I'm just saying that it's not like if you had just had Jussie Smollett or another person walking through that same neighborhood in Chicago and then they got shot to death, that it wouldn't have been about hate. But the media sure wouldn't have cared if it couldn't have been a racial political weapon to use against their political enemies. I think that how the media responds to this and how it responds to all these issues is wrong. Hate crimes are vastly exaggerated in frequency and intensity, and they do this in the media and on the political left to whip up hysteria, and that those lies are then used to point that hysteria against an ideology that is, at worst, only as implicable in racism and racial hysteria as their counterpart across the aisle. We are talking about an opposite side party that holds huge events in places like Chicago to celebrate noted anti-Semites like Mr. Farrakhan, who will go up on stage and talk about how Jews are termites and that he can't wait till God eradicates them from the earth. Right.
Well, actually, those rallies are not held by the Democrats or even necessarily liberals.
The Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam is just as it is equally as integrated into the Democratic Party as Pat Roberts or Jerry Falwell's churches are integrated into the Republican Party, and that's the truth, especially when you look at their significance.
Falwell and Roberts are garbage.
The fact that one of the top things that the Women's March had to go out of there and be like, the Women's March, we think that one of the most important things to note is that we support Minister Farrakhan. You know what I mean? Like it's fucking bizarre how far prominent leftists will go to let you know that they support a noted anti-Semite.
Yeah, I got no defense for the Farrakhan thing.
And I'm not saying you have to answer for that. Right. I'm just saying that just like we don't have to answer for real or imagined hate crimes committed by people who say they represent MAGA or a false implication that they do, you don't have to answer for Farrakhan.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can meet you somewhat in the middle and say that it's not a dick measuring contest, right?
The point is that the occurrence of these horrific incidents are cited out of context to the point of suggesting they're over commonality. And even incidents of the worst behaviors are, again, over exaggerated. In a lot of incidents, they are connected to Trump in a way that they have no connection, or they take incidents of mutual political violence and then they twist it as uniquely right-wing violence. What this ultimately shows is that left-wing narratives that dominate media, education, other prominent institutions make victimhood so rewarding, people commit federal felonies to get that status of honored victim. And after they fail, they try again, like Jussie Smollett did, and they expect to get away with it. Smollett thought he could possibly use that victimhood status to avoid getting his character on Empire killed and raise his profile as an actor and as a celebrity. And when you watch his interviews over and over again, you know what I mean? He's going out of his way to appear over magnanimous. You can tell that he's rehearsed his potential responses to these. He is milking it for everything. And that's what the problem is that not only do you distort the record to make it uniquely partisan rather than as bipartisan as the facts reflect, but it's also a way to gain political and cultural celebrity in a really disgusting way, and it does a disservice to real hate crimes.
Well, to be clear, the reason that we get so frustrated about this and get so heated about this, right, is because when we hear these things, we're like, oh, fuck, this is a demerit against my group, my brand, me. The truth is, there's a lot of people on the left who do and say shit that is really fucked up and problematic. I'm happy to fucking admit that. I just want us to get on the same page about this. You said in our very first episode of this show, the biggest problem that you could think of in the Republican Party was the fucking racist, in your words, right? And I know that you know that Trump brings that shit out of the woodwork, at least to some extent, more than George Bush did, more than Ronald Reagan did.
Okay, yeah, and I want to say that this too, as we both have frequently documented, I've undergone a shift towards being more moderate and more on the right, and going from never Trump to pro-Trump now. And what I've learned is that as much as I would still stand by some of the things that I said when I said that, what I've realized is that it's true that there are people like that on the right and that they're drawn out of the woodwork, is that when I made that analysis and I was uniquely targeting the right, it might even be a thing where it's 60-40, we have the racists, but it's close enough that it's not a unique racism problem within one side of the aisle. And that's why racism survives in the status quo, despite the fact that it's both sides have said, we're not the racists, you're the racist for decades. It's that we're not holding everybody to the same standard. And so things just perpetuate because people don't have the correct amount of incentives actually placed on them in the real world by the actions of the two political parties to disincentivize racism any more than we have now. My evolution from being never Trump to MAGA went from realizing that the average character, the average Trump supporter, is not that guy. It's everybody who's like, fuck that guy, and I'm going to ignore that person because if I acknowledge them, I give them power. And then sometimes it is sympathy or people who are willing to over contextualize the fact that political correctness is political. And so they let it go, and maybe they shouldn't.
Yeah, it's not a binary. It's not like one side's good and the other side is evil, right? And I think that's probably some common ground, right?
Yeah, I agree because that's the thing is that not everybody who supported Smollett or had sympathy for hate crime victims in the wake of this is evil, and I totally grant that, and I want people to know that that's how I feel, and that's how other people on the right feel about this.
Right. But at the same time, I look at how conservatives are reacting, and they're so gleeful. They're gleefully making fun of people. Truly making fun of people who were like, I feel for Jussie Smollett. I'm so sorry that this happened to you. It's really fucked up. It's so sad. This is what America, even if they say something like, it's so sad. This is what America's come to or something, where they're just expressing condolences that people are getting fucking lynched in the streets of Chicago.
Even if the Smollett thing was true, what two things should have happened? People should have recognized the most extreme claims of this and recognized that some of this had to come out to not be but then also it was engineered to be political by Smollett, right? Smollett wanted it to be political, and that especially that didn't trigger people going, hey, I'm paying attention to these hate crimes enough that I've noted that several of them have ended at the end where it turns out that the MAGA twist is not true. And of course, obviously, as per usual, our perceptions of fact and what the media tended to do is inherently tinged by our political perspectives, right? Like, are we at least recognizing that that's happening in this debate right now?
Oh yeah. I mean for sure. And this might be a good opportunity for us to get into common ground.
I agree. Yeah, I can at least appreciate and say that it's good. People should express outrage and disgust at legitimate hate crimes, and I think that one of our problems in the world right now is that we are too easy to shrug off too many things, and for a lot of different reasons, depending on what category it is, our outrage is selectively based across the aisle based on okay, well, I think that this thing is mundane, but this is an outrage, right? And then on the opposite side, they're like, no, that thing is mundane and this is the outrage. Right. We need to take a chill for a minute and just be consistent.
Yeah. Most Americans, at least on the record, will say racism is bad, homophobia is bad, bigotry is bad, violence is bad, fucking lynching is bad, hate crimes are bad, right? Bad shit is bad. Together, let's fucking not be cool with it.
Both sides have their own unique boogeymans.
Right. And ditto, man. I know a lot of fucking people that are like, if you want to fucking lower taxes on corporations, you should be shot in the stomach in front of your families. Maybe not a lot, but I definitely know at least 3 people that would probably sign on the dotted line on that statement. What the fuck?
That's what we need to do after this episode. We need to just put it out on Twitter. Would you like this tweet? And then say something really barbaric and then see who likes it.
See who likes it. God, no, there's a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's very Twitter.
That is Twitter. That's what Twitter is about. How close can I go to wishing this person to die or their family to die without getting vulnerable to suspension or deleting my account?
So yeah, I got a couple points of common ground. I'm not sure if the media was wrong to assume that Smollett was telling the truth without verifying what they could of his story first, but there is something there, especially if it's really a hoax. Even when asked why Smollett thought that he was attacked, his response was like, well, I come really hard against 45 and really hard, you know what I mean? So Smollett himself was basically planting the story of, I got attacked because of politics, because I'm critical of the right. So if that story turns out to not be true and it's all made up, well, the motive is extremely clear and the motive is fucked up.
Right. And right? to go back and give you guys credit again, there are a lot of people on the left who are contrite, who are doing some legitimate soul searching about who, if they've taken absolute positions I've been critical of, they're asking themselves, why would somebody fake a hate crime? You know what I mean? Asking themselves, how could there be an incentive for this?
I think at best, Smollett had convinced himself well, it's for the greater good because the right is racist and we just need the perfect little thing to set this whole thing on fire. You know what I mean? I'll make it happen.
And that's a thing that we both do on the right and left. Victim porn is a bipartisan virtue. It just gets deployed differently based on ideology.
Yeah. So thanks for listening.
I'm Right Brain Kurt.
I'm Left Brain Mike. Share, comment, like. I'm Left Brain Mike on social media. I'm Mike Left Brain on Twitter.
And I'm Right Brain Kurt on all those platforms.
The show's accounts, RBLB Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pornhub, the usuals.
And on YouTube. So if people aren't willing to look at it on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on anything else, hey, they'll look at YouTube.
Oh, yeah. You say, hey, I love this podcast, Right Brain, Left Brain. They're like, is it on YouTube? Because I only listen to podcasts on YouTube, which I don't understand, but a lot of people feel
There's millions of people who are like that.
I think it's RBLB Pod is the
RBLB Pod
YouTube handle. So go there and check us out too. Until next week, I'm Left Brain Mike.
And I'm Right Brain Kurt.
We'll talk to you later.
Cheers.